Welcome to another episode of the Byproduct podcast. I am your host, Ian Pruckner, and I'm so thankful to be spending a couple of minutes with you together today, getting better together, because when we get better, things get better. I'm very excited to have a friend of mine, Tyler Dickerhoof, on here today. And Tyler is an amazing entrepreneur, an incredible leader, coach, speaker, mentors tens and tens of thousands of people in the business community, just an all-around class act human being. So Tyler, welcome to the show today, my friend.
Man, I am so thankful and grateful to be here with you. Anytime I get to spend time with people like you, the energy you have, it lifts all of us. So, dude, it is a pleasure of mine just to sit here with you today.
Amen. And we were having a little candid conversation offline here, but I'm just going to jump right into it because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So today is Eclipse Day. I have my glasses here. My kid, if you look at my Instagram, you'll see the foil hat I had my kid made for me. But we were having this really interesting conversation about belief and people's yearning today to believe in something.
Yeah.
To believe in something and to have hope and to feel like they're part of something. And it was so interesting. We were just talking about the great lengths people go to. Let's start that combo again here for the people, right? Because I thought it was, first of all, spot on. And I think there's so much leadership wisdom there about what people are hungry for today and a wise leader's ability to find that in themselves and be able to give that and meet those needs. Very, very special people are the ones that are able to do that, but they get very, very special rewards in return for being that person. Talk a little bit about belief and people's desire to belong and believe.
Well, there's this guy that wrote this book. It's called Byproduct, and he talks about, belief and how belief goes to actions. I don't know if you've heard the guy. I mean, he's a great dude. Anyways, and so I've had this idea, and actually where it came from, and I'll tie into exactly what you were saying. But many years ago, my wife and I did Strength Finders, and her number one strength is belief. And so before that, I hadn't really thought much about it, but then understanding how she operates, how she makes decisions, what she chooses to do and not do. Oh, I understood belief a lot more. And I had this thought, I wrote it, belief is a superpower. The belief you have in yourself, the belief others have in you is a superpower that leads you to actions that your otherwise thoughts wouldn't have led you to, right? Just along what you share in Byproduct. And one thing that I've felt in that and understood from a leadership perspective is our greatest opportunity to influence people is through belief. Like I just said, it's a superpower. And we were talking about the tinfoil hat and how I shared that, people are yearning to believe in something, but they want to believe in something that has hope. And, I was talking, have never, been professionally in the church world, but have definitely watched in different ways. And I see so many church leaders specifically ruin the community for people because there's a lot of condemnation. There's a lot of, you're going to hell if you practice this or that. And there's not much hope. And what I really feel like when we give people the opportunity to believe in hope, believe in something so deep inside of them that better comes out of them, dude, that's when the relationship that I have, that I know you have with Jesus, that comes out. And it's not out of shame. Oh, I'm condemned. No, it's out of belief and hope. And so to have that belief in leadership, if you can do that, if you can pour belief on people, as I was reading your book, and I was thinking about this just recently and preparing some things and preparing for you to be on my podcast, honestly. And I was thinking about, the couple people that believe in me, that why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. And there's three of them that come to mind besides my wife, and she believes in me. But there's three individuals that have poured belief into me, that they see something in me that I don't see. And all three of them. First is Chad Johnson. He's encouraged me to do stuff that I didn't know I was really good at. Mark Cole, who is the now current owner, CEO of Maxwell Leadership, Chad Johnson's there as well. And then the great John Maxwell. And those three individuals over a couple year period have poured so much belief into me. They see things in me that I can't otherwise see, because I see the person I was maybe before when I made a lot of mistakes that didn't show up as the person that had the thoughts that led to the beliefs that led to the actions. that I currently have. And man, it's so amazingly powerful. And I'm going to say one last thing, not to go on and on and on about this, but as a coach, and I know you coach and I coach, and where I love to coach most is honestly like middle school, early high school, late elementary school sports. Why? Because those kids are so impressionable, and all they need to accomplish more than they ever thought they could is someone to smile, put their arm around them, and believe in them. That's all they need. That's all it takes. And they accomplish things they never thought they could. And the look on their face from going from, oh, I don't know if I can do this, to, wow, what did I just do? It happens professionally later in life. But man, that age is just so much fun to see.
I agree with you. And I think belief is the foundation. It's the first trait that every leader's got to learn, right?
Yeah.
Is belief in something or someone, and the ability then to communicate that belief. It's not, for you, it's okay to believe it, but when you're dealing with other people, you've got to share that belief with them. Like you said, those 3 men did for you, right? You borrowed their belief until you had belief of your own. And that's what we're belief lenders, essentially, and hope dealers, right? Like that's our job as leaders. And hope is one of these ideas too that's so interesting, because you said, sometimes people just need something to hope in, and that it's going to be better. But I think that hope is very divine, because Philippians 1:6 says that he who started a good work in you is faithful to complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. And that is God. That's our creator, right? He starts us here, but that's not where we belong. He loves us too much to keep us where we are. Our journey is this process of learning and becoming. And so I think that hope is something that's wired into each and every one of us, right from our creator, this desire and belief that things could be better, should be better, can be better. And if you can tap into that, if you can give that to people, that's a very powerful thing. And it's a commodity that's extremely rare. It's rarer than gold or silver or any of these precious things, is somebody who will stop long enough and take their focus off themselves long enough to put it on you and to speak into your life the things that they see in you that you might not see yet.
Well, continuing along your framework of, TBAR, right? The thoughts, beliefs, actions, results. In the framework that I have as part of the impact-driven leader, kind of the last section, which is lead, I divide that into 3 pieces. It's vision and clarity, connect, and influence. And the things that you're talking about as a leader, can we, bring hope to the forefront? Well, that's all about our vision and how clear we are communicating that. We recently went on a trip, and my wife, bless her heart, she had this desire to go to the beach and just have fun. We were in Cabo. And so the desire was to have this. And I said, well, what are our plans? And she goes, well, to go to the beach. It's like, okay. And ultimately what happened was there was a lack of communication between the two of us of what we wanted. So to see that our vision would come about, it ended up going through a few stumbling blocks. It's like, all right, we have to figure out our way. And what I was reminded there is that it's constantly about that vision and clarity. And just because I think I've said enough or I've painted the picture, if the people around you are giving you looks like, dude, I'm lost, then you haven't said anything to either connect or influence them. And that to me is what's so important, is we can have a vision, but if we don't connect with people, if we don't put our arm around them and walk with them, we're not going anywhere. And you can't have influence without connection, and connection doesn't come unless there's some type of clear vision of where are we going. I read a book several years ago called Communicating for Change. It was written by Andy Stanley, and he uses the parable of a truck driver going, hauling a trailer from one part of the country to the next. And he goes, you can back up to the trailer. You can back up, you can put it in park, you can get out, you can kick the tires, do all that stuff. But if you don't hook up the hitch, you're never taking that thing with you anywhere. So you can drive all the way across the country, but your trailer's still sitting back there.
Yeah.
And that image of, as a communicator, that image of a speaker, as a professional speaker that, often I see and hear people, they're like, oh, it's all about the presentation and that of every movement choreographed, and just this amazing Oscar-winning, Oscar-worthy performance. And the whole time, the audience is outside still getting popcorn. Because they never went with them. It does not matter. And so you're better off, hey, just be you. but connect with people and they will go with you wherever you're willing to lead them. As long as you have that hope and are willing to put belief into them that wherever we're going is going to accomplish something that we don't have currently.
Yeah. So communication and connection. I love that. One of my favorite quotes about communication is that the biggest inhibitor of communication is the illusion that it has occurred. Right? And we think we're saying and many times we think something, we think it's been communicated, we think people can read between the lines or understand what we understand. But as leaders, one of the things that has helped me a lot in communication is this idea of the toolbox. So you and I, Tyler, we have toolboxes that we've accumulated over decades of leading people. And so we have tools for all sorts of different things, and we know how to use them and when to use them. But many times we're trying to communicate from the perspective of that richness of knowledge to people who don't have the same toolbox. And so they're unfamiliar with some of that. And we've got to be very, very purposeful and very, very clear and very, very repetitious many times, unfortunately, to make sure that our message is getting across. But then you talked about connection as well. How do you make that connection?
Yeah. Well, as you were sharing that, I was thinking of several thoughts. And I was wanting to ask you is Ian, how much have you interacted with people where either English isn't their first language or you're working with an interpreter, right? You've probably had those instances. I've had those instances. And that exposure has taught me tremendously because you can learn so much from people by reading their body language. I think back when I was in college, I had a course that I absolutely loved. It's because I failed one. I had to take another. It's called interpersonal communication. And that led me to the idea of understanding that 90% of communication is wordless, has nothing to do with words. It's our gestures, our body language, our facial expressions, everything. I've interviewed a few experts in the area. Joe Navarro, who lives in Florida, just amazing guy as far as understanding. He was an FBI negotiator. So when I come back to this idea of, this connection, man, it has everything to do with whatever they're telling you and not words. I think back, there's a great wise man that, I would say, encourage people to let your actions do all the speaking for you, right? And we think back in the early Gospels, they were like, no, it isn't about your words, it's your actions. And so for me, in that connection and coming back to that is, that focus on connection is read what the person is telling you and then meet them where they're at. I have this. It's kind of centers around the problem that I aim to solve people. I recognize that one of my greatest limitations to serve other people is my insecurity. And what I've recognized through the discovery of that is every single person walking this world that is breathing today has an insecurity. And it's just a truth. It doesn't mean that you're any worse or less than anyone. We all have them. I have them. You have them. Thousands of other people listening and watching have it too. It's okay. But how do we overcome that? And for me, overcoming my insecurity is empathy. And I describe empathy as putting my arm around someone and walking with them. That's connecting with them. Because all of a sudden, when you're vulnerable enough to lift your arm and put it around someone, and you're willing to walk with them at their pace, that's a connection. Because now all of a sudden what I care about, they must care about, because it comes back to another biblical kind of adage is don't be unequally yoked. If I put my arm around you, we're walking along the beach there at Siesta Key or wherever we're going to go in Florida, and I take off and I'm going faster than you. You're either going to catch up to me or I'm going to drag you. And that isn't good for either one of us if I drag you. At the same point, if you're like, I am taking off and I'm holding back here, we got our arms around each other and you're dragging me, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
And so part of that connection and that active empathy, as I like to describe it in that sense, because it's very active, is that we have to go together. And that connection starts with the words that we speak, but also reading how people take that and what their body is telling you even before you speak. Those are the elements of connection, which are really communication, which lead to everything.
It's really interesting. A couple of thoughts that I wanted to unpack there a little bit. So you talked about walking with them, and I love that. I love that imagery, but even more than imagery, I think you touched on something that is really about the X factor of leadership, because when you're willing to take the time and love people and empathize with them and walk with them, that really moves you from what you do to who you are. And there's a connection there when you're talking about the insecurities. Much of the time, the insecurity is about a perceived shortcoming. We're not as good as this person, or we don't have as much information or whatever, but we can move out of the realm of what we do, and we can move the conversation to the realm of who we are when we come alongside of people in that way, right? And I think that that's a really, really interesting perspective on how to eliminate some of that insecurities. When I become you focused instead of me focused, the insecurities lie with me, not with you. Those are my challenges, not necessarily your challenges with me. So if I can just go and meet you and focus on you and us, then I take my focus off of all the things I think I'm not, and I can play in that zone of genius where I fully execute on all the things that I know that I am, not the things that I think that I'm not. Really, really interesting there. In terms of connection, one of the things that I've always thought that the leaders that get the most connection with their people are, they do two things. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Number one is they live their message. One of the things that I've noticed about the best leaders that I've been around is they embody that message, right? They are, it's not what they do, it's who they are, right? It exudes from them in every place. And I feel like people get a confidence there, a trust there, that like, you're not trying to sell me something, you are the thing, right? Like you're not trying to get me to believe in something, you are the belief. So that they live the message and they love the people. And if they can do those two things, that's a recipe for magnetic connection with people. When people follow you like a lighthouse in a storm. Talk to me about that, living the message and loving the people. What does that mean to you? How do we do that well?
You know, as you first said that first thing, I thought vulnerability. And then as you said the second, it was authentic. And it's authentic vulnerability. See, when you're willing to be authentic and vulnerable, then you're willing to not make it about you. Instead, it's about others. It's that great part of communication, right? It's that great connecting piece is when I'm authentically who I am, and I'm not here to maybe hide from what I was, or I'm maybe not putting myself in a place where, and it's kind of mixed messaging. There's oftentimes fake it till you make it. And you're like, all right, well, is that believing the thoughts of you are what you are, even though you don't think you are? Then great, fake that all day long, because that's the only way you're going to lead yourself to somewhere else. But if you're trying to fake it in order to be someone that other people want you to be for, attaining something, then it's got completely wrong. It's not going to work, and it's not authentic, and it's not vulnerable. And I think of instances where, there's many people that know you from afar and then finally meet you. I've had the same thing, and the best thing that I've ever heard, and always what I want to be. And this is, people that I admire most, what's happened to is when I meet them, they're even better than what I thought. Meaning they are more real, they're more authentic, they're more willing to be vulnerable. It's the people that, you hear a message on YouTube and then you watch them somewhere else and you're like, is that the same person? Or you read someone's book, you listen to their podcast, you're like, oh my goodness, this person I just love them. And then you go to see them in person and then you're like, dude, this person is just here for a show. Like, or they surround themselves with a different group of people, on the left side and on the right side is another group of people, and they're completely polarized. And you're like, dude, are you just out for whoever will put you up on a stage? Like, what are you about? Now, I temper that because I also have a mentor who is willing to go into those spaces because he has a greater calling. And so it's not absolute, but it's also, you meet him, and he's as good, if not better, than anything you ever imagined about him. And so there's never that question of, is he authentic? And he's tremendously vulnerable. And it's like, okay, if I can focus on that, my ability to truly connect, to truly be able to impact people, it's the only pathway it's ever going to happen with it. Because if I ever sell out to a point where it's like, well, I need to make sure Ian likes me, because if Ian likes me, well, then that's going to give me all these opportunities. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to talk to, Pat and, whatever Pat wants. And that's what people are. No, I got to figure out who I am and be willing to own those insecurities and how they show up in order that I can be me. So I can show up with Ian. He's like, that's the guy I know. And I can show up with Pat and there's like, that's the guy I know. Then that's who people will follow.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting, Tyler, because you're talking about authenticity and vulnerability. And when you hear that, these are sort of terms that are floated around out there a lot. But what's so interesting about it is, as a leader, especially as a leader, those things are very, very difficult because you are in a public eye. Everything you do gets magnified, and you're the one that has all the answers and knows all the right ways. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to set that down and say, hey, I don't know, or I'm learning with you, or these are my challenges we have going. But people connect with that in a big way. And one of the reasons that I've always thought that is because if we're willing to look foolish, if we're willing to be vulnerable, if we're willing to put it out there, if we're willing to take losses, we're generally willing to do that for the cause, right? We become cause-centered instead of self-centered. And the cause is ultimately the thing that we're all drawn to together. It's the movement, not necessarily the person. The person, a great leader, in my opinion, is a steward of their movement. Yeah. Right? Like that's, and can pass the movement on beyond them, by the way, right? Like that success without succession sort of idea. And I think one of the great ways to make connection there is exactly what you're talking about, being vulnerable and authentic, because people see, hey, if they were trying to make themselves look good, they wouldn't be going here. Yeah. They want to make the cause look good, and they'll do whatever they need to do for the sake of that cause. And that endears people to that cause. It's like, I love reading Revolutionary War history, and you hear these tales of George Washington riding out onto the front lines of battle against all of the council of his other generals and commanders. And there were numerous written notes that infantrymen, just normal like soldiers at the front lines of battle, had written to their spouses, talking about the heat of the battle and how crazy it was out there. And then I turned to my left and there was General Washington on his horse standing next to me. And in those moments, these people who they couldn't pay, they were outgunned, outmanned, outthought. It was the world's biggest superpower taking on the biggest ragtag bunch of militiamen you've ever seen in your life. But it gave them the life or death commitment to that cause because they saw a leader living that cause right along with them. Well,
I think, to your point there, in many places, where we struggle most in either our country, industry, and it can go beyond the borders of the United States, is when the leader thinks that their job is anything but serving the people. I've seen this in instances and have had the luxury of interacting with many high-level CEOs from, billionaire level to, top 100 to everyday companies, right? And it's the people that understand I can no longer do the production. In other words, just like Washington and the infantrymen, my job is not to hold the musket, the muzzle loader, and the bayonet. That's not my job. It's to be on the horse and direct you in the way, but continue the fight. I can't get those places wrong, but yet at the same point, I'm not trying to do it all. And I need to be present so you see I'm in it with you, doing the things that only I can do. And yet sometimes the way for the executive, the CEO, the general to understand what's going on most in the mentality of all of those soldiers and or the front lines is he's riding right there on his horse and making sure that he can see what's going on. And when I come back to the authentic vulnerability, I don't need to know how everything in an organization works to be the best leader for that organization. Right. I just have to know what I do know and don't know, and then understand who is best suited to do all the things that I shouldn't be or can't be doing. And that's a hard journey for some leaders, especially in an era where it was like the way that you got promoted is when you knew the most. Yep. When you performed the best and knew the most, that's how you got promoted. In the world that I think we've evolved into and looking back to even the 250, 300 years ago, that wasn't really the leader that knew everything. They were just willing to be out there and do it. And I think that's what's coming back to the authentic vulnerability is the days that we own that and the leaders that own it, what they do and don't know, and aren't trying to hide, and they're not trying to live behind their insecurities. Man, that's when they connect with people. That's when they're able to influence them and create a legacy that, here several hundred years later, we're talking about what that infantryman wrote about Washington. That's legacy stuff.
100%. Talk to me about the impact-driven leader. Where did that come from? What does it mean?
Yeah, it really came much out of what I think you recognize too is kind of this, what are our results for? And for me, it's understanding the difference from success to significance and understanding, I can be successful on my own or will others to it. But man, that's not going to get me very far in life. And so as I evolved as a leader and I understood some of my insecurities holding me back, I really saw it as an opportunity to walk alongside with others and help them be impact driven, be driven to make an impact that is bigger than themselves for much longer than themselves. That led me on a journey to do a lot of growth, a lot of mentorship with people I've mentioned earlier, eventually coming up with a framework that I call awaken, grow, lead. It's recognizing our fears and insecurities, owning them, getting past them. It's growing with others, for others, and in support of others. And then lead, which I mentioned earlier. It's the vision and clarity. It's the connect and influence. And to me, that is what being impact driven is about. So I have a podcast, the Impact Driven Leader podcast, have a community, have a roundtable group where we go through all of that, kind of much like what you do at the War Room, because that's when I've transformed. And you can't have enough of those spaces to be vulnerable, to be open, to learn in layers with others. And that's what I've envisioned really in this impact-driven leader community that I've had for a couple of years now.
Tyler, how do people connect with you?
Yeah. So
how can they get more information about the impact-driven leader?
Yeah. The best way you can there's two ways really, kind of TylerDickerhoof.com, which is my website, all sorts of information there. There's also a free video series, the 4 barriers of leadership that you can access. You also get, tied into my weekly newsletter where I share either thoughts or ideas or upcoming podcast, or go to YouTube. And that's where most everything is held, whether it's my podcast, whether it's weekly video content, whether it's daily content, whether it's live content. And you can just search Impact Driven Leader on YouTube. You can also search Tyler Dickerhoof. But those are the 2 best ways. Of course, I'm also on the other social channels, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn.
Most. Are you doing dances? Can we find you dancing?
If I'm dancing, I'll be dancing with my cows, or I'll be, here. There is an element. You shared this earlier. I might have to post this video. You're urging. Several years ago, I was at an event, and we had LMFAO performing, and they happened to have these big blow-up zebras. So I was riding a zebra across the stage, having fun. And it reminds me earlier when you said something, and I have zero problem making a fool of myself in service of others.
Yep.
And I believe when you do that, that's when your authenticity comes out. So am I going to be choreographed dance with maybe if my daughter wants to, but it will be in service of someone else.
I thought we'd pick up some hot steps from you on TikTok, brother.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll work on that, right? We'll work on that. Guys, listen, hey, go check out Tyler's stuff. It's really, really fantastic. You all know that I have a lot of curating with who we bring on to this show. And there's just a lot of guys out there that are getting it half right. And they've dialed into some principles of success and leadership and achievement that have gotten them really great results. But they're not really great people. And they don't necessarily do those things for long-lasting, impact-driven reasons, right? And that's not a win to me. Tyler, one of the things that I always teach our group in the War Room is 5 F's: faith, family, fitness, finance, future self. Those things matter. In fact, in my opinion, I think they're the most important things in our life. They're the things where we can't afford to get them wrong. Because if one of them is wrong, we're all wrong, at least for a period of time. They impact each other inseparably and irreparably, right? We can't win financially, lose our family, and not be affected by that, both financially and otherwise. We can't have a great family life and lose our health and expect to be here for the duration of the rest of that time that those people want us, need us, care about us, and wish we were here for. We've got to get them right. And Tyler, you're a guy that's getting it.
Well,
A guy that's getting it right. You care about things that are important, and you've done an enormous amount of work on you. And it's evident to see that you're operating at a really high level as a leader, a communicator, a speaker. And so thank you for all the work that you put into you to become that person that the people who follow you needed you to be. And I know that you're going to be faithful to continue developing that and growing it as you go. And so that's really exciting. Guys, go follow Tyler, go find him on YouTube, get on the podcast, get on his newsletter. It's great stuff. I get the newsletter. Get the newsletter, guys. Plug in. Tyler is a great leader, is a great person to be connected to. Thank you so much for your time today, my brother. It's been amazing. I wish we had some more time to connect. Until next time, we'll see you guys.